The lecture hall hummed with the soft bioluminescence of 300 alien students, all waiting for Professor Vorkalis to begin his weekly seminar on extinct galactic predators. I was sitting in the third row, my 4 eye stalks trained on the holographic display that flickered to life above the podium. My name is Blip Torrens, and I am a Qualarian, which means I have the unfortunate biology of looking like a floating jellyfish crossed with a very anxious accountant. Professor Kellis was a Morgathian, tall and imposing, with skin that rippled like liquid mercury, and a voice that could make asteroids reconsider their trajectory. He adjusted his translation collar and the device crackled to life. "Good cycle, students," he boomed, his 3 mouths moving in perfect synchronization. "Today we discuss a topic that has fascinated xenobiologists for over 2,000 standard rotations, the galaxy's most dangerous predator. A species that made the Void Reapers look like household pets. The creature that single-handedly caused the extinction of 47 different civilizations before vanishing from known space." A murmur rippled through the lecture hall. Everyone loved a good extinction story. It made us feel superior, safe, protected by our civilized bubbles and energy shields. Grix Nomara, a Hectarian sitting 2 seats away from me, leaned over with his crystallized mandibles clicking excitedly. "I heard it was the bone crushers of Argon 9, he whispered. "Wrong," hissed Tula, a serpentine Vexian coiled on the seat behind us. "It was definitely the shadow stalkers from the nebula cluster." Professor Kellis raised one of his 6 arms, demanding silence. The holographic display shifted, showing a star map of the Orion Spur, a relatively quiet section of the galaxy that most civilizations avoided due to its unstable stellar formations and lack of valuable resources. "The species I speak of," Kellis continued, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper that somehow still carried across the entire amphitheater, "originated from this region. They evolved on a death world, Class 12 hazard rating, mind you. The atmosphere was toxic to most species. The gravity would crush a Qualarian flat." He glanced at me when he said that, and I felt my gelatinous body quiver with indignation. The weather patterns were catastrophically unpredictable. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruption. This planet was actively trying to murder anything living on its surface. The hologram zoomed in on a small blue and green marble of a planet rotating slowly in the void. It looked almost peaceful from this distance, with swirling white clouds and vast oceans that sparkled under the light of a yellow dwarf star. "Beautiful, is it not?" Kellis asked, his tone dripping with irony. "Deceptively so. This world was a forge, students, a crucible that created the most efficient killing machines the galaxy has ever documented. They called it Terra." Someone gasped. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Terra. The name itself had become something of a legend, whispered in the dark corners of spaceports and military academies across known space. "For those unfamiliar with the historical records," Kellis continued, pacing across the stage with his robes flowing behind him like liquid shadow, Terra was home to the apex predator known as humanity. The hologram changed again, displaying what looked like a bipedal creature with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a disturbingly small amount of natural armor. No exoskeleton, no chitinous plating, no venomous spines, just soft, vulnerable flesh covered in a thin layer of fabric clothing. Grictus snorted, a wet, bubbling sound. That is the deadliest predator. It looks like it would die if you breathed on it too hard." Several students laughed. Even I had to admit the creature looked rather unimpressive compared to the gallery of nightmares we had studied in previous lectures. The bone crushers had been 12 feet tall with mandibles that could snap starship hull plating. The shadow stalkers could phase through solid matter and had acid for blood. This human thing looked like it belonged in a petting zoo, not a threat assessment database. Professor Kellis smiled, and all 3 of his mouths curved upward in a way that made my survival instincts scream. "Yes, yes, they look harmless, do they not? Weak, fragile, poorly designed. No claws to speak of, no natural weapons, no armor plating. Their sensory organs are limited to a narrow spectrum. By all logical assessment, they should have gone extinct within their first 1,000,000 rotations of evolution." He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "And yet," he said softly, "they did not. Instead, they thrived. They conquered their death world. They bent it to their will. They turned Terra from a hostile nightmare into a paradise, and then when they had exhausted their own planet's challenges, they looked up at the stars and decided to conquer those too. The hologram shifted through images. Humans building impossible structures. Humans crossing vast oceans in wooden vessels. Humans splitting atoms. Humans standing on their own moon, planting a flag in soil that should have been forever beyond their reach. The secret to their success, Kellis explained, his voice taking on a lecturer's rhythm, was not physical superiority. It was adaptability, persistence, pattern recognition, social cooperation on a scale that defies evolutionary logic, and perhaps most terrifying of all, creativity. Tillo's tongue flicked nervously. Creativity? That is what made them dangerous. Creativity, Kellis confirmed, combined with a biological quirk that we still do not fully understand. You see, humans possess something called an adrenal response system. When threatened, their bodies flood with chemical compounds that temporarily enhance their physical capabilities. Increased strength, faster reaction times, reduced pain sensitivity, heightened aggression. They become, quite literally, more dangerous when you try to kill them. That is absurd, Grix muttered. No species becomes stronger when injured. That violates basic survival logic. And yet, Kellis said, the historical records are quite clear. There are documented cases of humans continuing to fight after sustaining injuries that would have killed any other species 3 times over. Broken bones, massive blood loss, punctured organs. They just kept going. He pulled up another hologram, this one showing a human in primitive armor, covered in wounds, still swinging a crude metal blade at adversaries. This image is from their early warfare period. Note the multiple arrow antertrations, the severed arm, the facial trauma. This individual survived and lived for another 40 rotations. A collective shudder rippled through the lecture hall. But physical resilience was merely one advantage, Kellis continued. What truly set humans apart was their capacity for violence. Not mindless aggression, mind you, calculated. Strategic, industrialized violence on a scale that would make a Hectarian warlord weep with envy. The hologram cycled through increasingly disturbing images. Weapons. So many weapons. Swords, guns, bombs, missiles. Each iteration more efficient at destruction than the last. Within 5,000 rotations, Kellis said, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect or horror or both. They had developed nuclear fission. Within another 1,000, they had orbital platforms capable of glassing entire continents. They created biological weapons that could wipe out populations in days, chemical agents that could dissolve organic tissue, kinetic bombardment systems, antimatter warheads. They turned warfare into an art form, and then they turned that art form into a science. Wait, a voice called from the back row. It was Vesh Kolix, a Threlian with too many teeth and not enough common sense. If they were so dangerous, why did they go extinct? What killed them? Professor Kellis's expression darkened. That, young Vesh, is the question that has haunted xenohistorians for centuries. The official record states that humanity destroyed itself in what they called World War V, a global conflict that utilized every weapon in their considerable arsenal. The death toll was catastrophic. 98% of their population gone in a matter of rotations. Their planet was rendered uninhabitable. Their colonies collapsed. Within a century, humanity was declared extinct. He deactivated the hologram and the lecture hall fell into darkness except for the ambient bioluminescence of the students. The deadliest species the galaxy has ever known, Kellis said, his voice echoing in the silence, is gone, extinct. A cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked aggression and technological advancement without wisdom. Their planet is now a quarantined dead zone. No ship is permitted within 50 astronomical units of Terra. The species that once threatened to reshape the galaxy is nothing more than a footnote in our history texts. The lights gradually returned to normal levels. Students began packing their datapads and neural recorders, muttering amongst themselves about the lecture. Rix was already speculating about what kind of emergency protocols would have been necessary to contain a human outbreak if they had achieved faster than light travel before destroying themselves. I was about to float out of my seat when I noticed something odd. In the front row, near the edge of the curved seating arrangement, there was a figure I had not paid attention to before. Small. Bipedal. wearing some kind of simple clothing that looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate environmental suits and bioarmor most students wore. The figure raised a single limb, an arm, with 5 digits at the end, a hand. Professor Kellis, who had been organizing his notes, looked up. His mercury skin rippled with confusion. "Yes, do you have a question about the material?" The figure stood, and I felt my eyes stalks involuntarily retract in a defensive posture. Because now that I was actually looking, actually paying attention, I recognized the body structure, the proportions, the disturbing lack of natural defenses. "Professor Kellis," the figure said, and her voice was surprisingly pleasant, with an odd accent that the translation caller struggled to process cleanly. "I think there has been a small error in your lecture." The room fell silent. Every student turned to look at the speaker. Kellis tilted his head, which on a Morgathian looked like his entire upper body was pivoting at an unnatural angle. "An error? In my research? Young student, I have spent 30 rotations compiling this material from every available source in the galactic archives." "I am sure you have," the figure said politely, and there was something in her tone, something that made the hair equivalent on my gelatinous body stand on end. "But you see, I have something of an insider perspective on this particular topic." She took a step forward, and the lighting panels above caught her face clearly for the first time. 2 eyes, forward-facing, predator configuration, a nose, a mouth that curved upward in what I had learned was called a smile, though it looked more like a threat display. "My name is Jade Corin," she said, her voice carrying easily across the stunned silence of the lecture hall. "And I am afraid I have to correct you on several points. First, Terra is not a dead world. Second, humanity did not destroy itself in World War V. We stopped, we learned, we adapted, and third, well," she paused and her smile widened, showing flat white teeth that somehow looked more menacing than any fang or mandible I had ever seen, "we are very much not extinct." The lecture hall exploded into chaos. Students screeching, chittering, humming, and screaming in about 40 different languages. Greeks fell backward off his seat. Tola uncoiled so fast she knocked over 3 other students. Someone triggered an emergency alarm, and klaxons began wailing throughout the building. Professor Kellis stood frozen on his stage, his mercury skin cycling through colors I did not have names for. His 3 mouths opened and closed silently, unable to form words. Jade Corin just stood there, calm as a neutron star, waiting for the panic to subside. She looked around the room with those predator eyes, taking in every detail, and I realized with growing horror that she was assessing us, counting exits, identifying threats, calculating variables, doing exactly what a predator does when introduced to a new environment full of potential prey. A security team burst through the main entrance, weapons charged and ready. They were Chronicles mercenaries, 6-foot-tall insectoids with natural armor plating and paralytic stingers. They surrounded Jade with military precision, forming a containment perimeter. She did not move, did not show fear, just smiled that terrible smile and raised her hands in what I assumed was a gesture of non-aggression. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked sweetly. The lead Chronicles guard clicked his mandibles, his weapon trained on her center mass. "You will come with us. Immediately. No sudden movements." "Of course," Jade said agreeably. "Though I should mention I am a registered student here, transferred in from the Sol exchange program 3 cycles ago. All my documentation is in order. You can check with the administration office." Professor Kellis finally found his voice. "The Sol exchange program, Sol as in the solar system, as in Terra's solar designation." "The very same," Jade confirmed. "Though we call it Earth now. Terra was always a bit formal for our tastes." "Earth," Kellis repeated weakly, like he was testing the word and finding it sharp enough to cut. "You call your death world Earth. We call it home," Jade corrected gently. "And it is quite lovely this time of year. Well, in the northern hemisphere anyway. Southern hemisphere is heading into winter, and trust me, you do not want to experience an Australian winter without proper preparation." One of the security guards made a clicking sound that the translation caller rendered as nervous laughter. "This is impossible. Humans are extinct. The records are clear." "The records," Jade said, her tone taking on an edge that made my survival instincts scream louder, "are incomplete. You see, the Galactic Council made a decision about 2,000 rotations ago, right after we had our little incident. They decided humanity was too dangerous to be allowed into the wider galactic community, too toil, too aggressive, too creative, so they quarantined us, blockaded our system, told everyone we had destroyed ourselves, turned us into a scary story to tell young Academy students. She looked directly at Professor Kellis, and her smile never wavered. But we did not destroy ourselves, Professor. We grew up, we learned from our mistakes, we rebuilt, we thrived, and we have been watching you, all of you, for centuries, learning your languages, studying your cultures, monitoring your broadcasts. Waiting. Waiting for what? I heard myself ask, my voice coming out as a terrified squeak. Jade turned those predator eyes on me, and I felt every survival instinct in my biology scream at me to flee, to hide, to dissolve into a puddle and seep into the floor grating. Waiting, she said softly, for the right moment to introduce ourselves properly, to prove that we are not the monsters you made us out to be in your historical records, to show the galaxy that humans can be civilized. The way she said the word civilized, with just the slightest emphasis, made it clear that she was aware of the irony, that she understood exactly how the galaxy saw her species, and that she found it amusing. So, she continued, addressing the room at large, I am here as part of the first official diplomatic exchange between Earth and the Galactic Council, a trial program. If I can successfully integrate into your academic system without eating anyone or starting any wars, then maybe, just maybe, humanity gets invited to join the galactic community. If I fail, well, she shrugged, a gesture that looked deceptively casual, then I guess your scary stories get to stay scary stories. Professor Kellis slowly lowered himself into his chair, looking like he had aged several rotations in the span of a few minutes. This is unprecedented. I need to contact the administration, the council, the military, someone. Already been done, Jade assured him. My presence here is fully authorized. I have diplomatic immunity, a student visa, and a very stern warning from my government to not do anything that would be considered an act of war, which, according to my briefing, includes, let me check my notes, physical violence, technological contamination, cultural disruption, and showing off. Showing off? Rix asked weakly. Humans have a tendency to be competitive. Jade explained. We like to win. We like to prove we are the best. It is a survival trait that served us well on Earth but tends to make other species nervous. So I have been instructed to maintain a low profile, blend in, be normal. She looked around at the chaos she had just created with a single sentence and smiled apologetically. I may have already failed that last part. The security team was conferring with someone through their communication devices, probably confirming her story. After a tense moment, the lead guard lowered his weapon. Your credentials check out, he said grudgingly, but we will be monitoring you closely. I would expect nothing less, Jade replied cheerfully. The guards withdrew, though they positioned themselves at the exits, clearly not willing to leave entirely. The lecture hall slowly settled back into a nervous silence, with every student staring at the human like she was a bomb that might explode at any moment. Professor Kellis cleared his throat. Well then, this has been educational. Class dismissed. We will continue this discussion next cycle after I have had time to process this development. Students began filing out quickly, giving Jade a wide berth as they passed. I should have left with them. Every rational thought in my brain was telling me to float away as fast as my propulsion membranes could carry me. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and Quilarians are unfortunately blessed with an overabundance of it. I drifted closer to where Jade was gathering her belongings, a simple bag made of some kind of woven material. Up close, I could see more details, the way her skin had tiny imperfections, the way her hair moved independently when she turned her head, the subtle muscle movements under her clothing that suggested a biological complexity I had not appreciated from the hologram images. Can I help you? Jade asked, noticing my approach. Her voice was friendly, but I could see her body language shift subtly into a more alert posture. Yes, maybe, I stammered, my translator collar struggling with my nervous speech pattern. I am Blip Torrens, xenobiology major, and I have approximately 7,000 questions. Jade laughed, and the sound was surprisingly warm. Not threatening at all, which somehow made it more threatening because it suggested she could choose when to be dangerous and when to be charming, and that level of control was terrifying. 7,000, she said. That is pretty specific. Most people just go with the standard questions. Are you really human? Do you eat meat? How many push-ups can you do? Can you really run for hours without stopping? Can you? I asked before my better judgment could stop me. Yes, she said simply. Humans are endurance predators. We evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Not the fastest sprint in the animal kingdom, but we can maintain a steady pace longer than almost anything else. It is called persistence hunting, and it is terrifying if you are on the receiving end. She said it so casually, like she was discussing the weather and not describing a hunting technique that sounded like something from a nightmare. Why are you here? I asked. Really? You say it is a diplomatic exchange, but why now? Why after 2,000 rotations? Jade's expression became more serious. Because the galaxy is changing. Blip. New threats emerging. Old alliances fracturing. The Council is starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, they might need humanity's particular skill set, our experience with warfare, our creativity and problem-solving, our tendency to look at impossible situations and say, challenge accepted. She slung her bag over her shoulder and started walking toward the exit. I floated alongside her, unable to help myself. Plus, she added with a grin, we were getting bored. 2,000 years of isolation. We have explored our entire solar system, built colonies on Mars, stations around Jupiter. We have mapped every asteroid and charted every comet. We have advanced our technology to the point where we are knocking on the door of faster-than-light travel. We were going to break quarantine eventually. The Council decided it was better to invite us in than wait for us to kick down the door. That is horrifying, I said honestly. Probably. Jade agreed. But hey, look on the bright side. You get to say you were in the first class with a human student. That is going to make for great conversation at parties. If I survive long enough to attend parties, I muttered. Jade stopped walking and turned to face me fully. Her expression was gentle, almost kind. Blip, I am not going to hurt you. Or anyone else here. I know my species has a reputation. Earned reputation. I will admit. But we really have changed. We learned that survival does not mean dominating everything around you. It means cooperation, mutual benefit, building something better together. But you still have all those weapons, I pointed out, all that capacity for violence. We do, she acknowledged. But having a weapon and using a weapon are two different things. Humans learned that the hard way. We nearly destroyed ourselves because we could not control our own worst impulses. But we pulled back from the brink. We chose differently, and now we are trying to prove that we deserve a seat at the galactic table. She started walking again, and I followed, my curiosity overwhelming my fear. Besides, she added with a mischievous glint in her eye, you have not seen anything yet. Wait until you meet the rest of my delegation. We brought a Marine, a diplomat, an engineer, and a chef. We figured if we are going to introduce humanity to the galaxy, we should put our best foot forward. A chef? I asked, confused. Food is universal, Jade explained. Nothing brings people together like sharing a meal. And trust me, human cuisine is going to blow your taste receptors, assuming you have taste receptors. You do have taste receptors, right? I absorb nutrients through osmotic diffusion, I admitted. Huh, Jade said thoughtfully. That is going to make dinner parties awkward. We reached the exit, and Jade paused at the threshold, looking back at the empty lecture hall. You know what the funny thing is? She said quietly. Professor Kellis was not wrong. We are dangerous, probably the most dangerous species you will ever encounter. But dangerous does not mean evil. A knife can kill, or it can cut bread. A fire can burn, or it can warm. Humans learned to control our fire. Now we are asking the galaxy to give us a chance to prove it. She looked at me with those forward-facing predator eyes, and I saw something in them that surprised me. Hope. Genuine hope that this could work. That humanity could find a place among the stars that did not involve conquest or destruction. So what do you say, Blip Torrens? Jade asked. Want to be friends with the deadliest species in the galaxy? Fair warning, we are terrible at personal space, we hug when we are happy, and we make really bad jokes at inappropriate times. I should have said no. Every instinct was screaming at me to float away and never look back. But there was something about this human, this Jade Karin, that was compelling. Maybe it was the honesty. Maybe it was the vulnerability hidden under all that confidence. Maybe I was just too curious for my own good. Friends might be premature, I said carefully, but acquaintances with potential for upgrade. Jade's face split into a wide grin. I will take it. Come on, acquaintance Blip. Let me buy you whatever Quilarians consume for sustenance. We can discuss those 7,000 questions you have. I've got time. And honestly, I could use someone to talk to who is not going to immediately assume I am going to bite their head off. Do humans actually do that? I asked nervously. Bite heads off? Only on special occasions. Jade said deadpan, then laughed at my expression. Kidding. We are kidding. That is one of those inappropriate jokes I warned you about. Come on, I know a place that serves nutrient solution. And so, against all logical reasoning and survival instincts, I found myself floating alongside a human through the corridors of the Galactic Academy, wondering if I had just made the best decision of my life or signed my own death warrant. Probably both. Knowing my luck. The nutrient bar that Jade had dragged me to was called the Floating Gastropod, which was either a clever play on words or a terrible one, depending on how much you valued your dignity. It was located in the lower districts of the Academy Station, where the artificial gravity was slightly weaker and the lighting had a distinctly greenish tint that made everyone look vaguely ill. Jade slid into a booth designed for species with actual skeletal structures, while I hovered beside the table, absorbing the ambient moisture from the air because apparently my biology was determined to make every social situation uncomfortable. So, Jade said, pulling out a datapad from her bag and setting it on the table, question number 1 of 7,000. Fire away. I had spent the entire walk here trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent, but now that I had her full attention, my mind went completely blank. Finally, I managed to squeak out, "How did you get past the quarantine blockade?" Jade smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested she had been waiting for this exact question. We did not exactly. See, the blockade has been maintained by automated defense platforms for the last 1,000 rotations. No living crew, no actual oversight. Just old AI systems running on protocols that nobody bothered to update. About 50 years ago, we figured out how to hack into their communication network. We have been feeding them false data ever since, making them think we are still a dead civilization. Meanwhile, we have been building ships, training diplomats, and preparing for first contact. That is terrifying. I said. That is strategy, Jade corrected. Humans are really good at finding loopholes. It is kind of our thing. Give us a set of rules, and we will find 17 different ways to bend them without technically breaking them. The Council said we could not leave our system. They never said we could not prepare to leave our system. They never said we could not study them from a distance. They never said we could not learn everything about galactic civilization while we waited for our chance. A server approached our table, a Blixian with too many tentacles and not enough interest in customer service. "What do you want?" it asked in a bored tone. "Nutrient solution, grade 7, room temperature," I said quickly. Jade scanned the menu display. "What do you have that is protein-based and does not require me to sign a waiver?" The server blinked its primary eye cluster. "You are the human." "News travels fast," Jade said dryly. "Kitchen has been talking about you all cycle. We have never served a human before. Do not know what is safe for your biology. I can eat most carbon-based proteins." Jade explained patiently. "Nothing with alkaline compounds. Nothing with heavy metals. If it would kill a Terran mammal, it will probably kill me. When in doubt, go with something simple. Grilled protein. Some kind of vegetable equivalent. Maybe a starch if you have it." The server made a note on its pad. "I will see what we can do. Try not to die. Bad for business." "I will do my best," Jade promised. After the server slithered away, I continued my interrogation. "Why did you reveal yourself like that, in the lecture hall? You could have kept your identity secret." Blended in. Jade leaned back in the booth, and I noticed her eyes were constantly moving, tracking everyone who entered or left the establishment. Threat assessment, always assessing. Because secrecy was not the mission, integration was the mission. Hiding would have defeated the purpose. Plus, Professor Kellis was spreading a lot of misinformation about my species. Could not let that stand. We have enough problems with our reputation without people thinking we are all extinct super predators. But you are super predators, I pointed out. We're, Jade corrected. Past tense. We evolved, adapted, changed. That is what humans do best, Blip. We change. We improve. We learn from our mistakes. Well, usually. Sometimes it takes us a few tries. Okay, a lot of tries. But we get there eventually. Our orders arrived surprisingly quickly. My nutrient solution looked exactly like nutrient solution always did, vaguely translucent and thoroughly unappetizing. Jade's meal was some kind of grilled protein cube with purple vegetation on the side and what looked like a grain substance that steamed gently in the station's recycled air. Jade picked up her utensil, a simple two-pronged fork, and speared a piece of protein. She chewed thoughtfully, her expression neutral. Not bad, tastes like chicken. What is chicken? I asked. A bird we domesticated on Earth. Tasty. Docile. We bred them for food. Chickens outnumber humans by about 3-to-1 on Earth now, probably our most successful terraforming project, if you think about it. You bred an entire species just to eat it. I asked, horrified. That is agriculture. Lip, welcome to civilization. You think your nutrient solution grows on trees? Jade took another bite. Actually, on second thought, this does not taste like chicken. More like fish, or maybe pork. Hard to tell with alien protein. Before I could respond, the door to the floating gastropod burst open with enough force to trigger the emergency pressure seals. 3 figures entered, and I recognized them immediately. Grix Nomara, Tula the Vexian, and Vesh Kolix. They looked around the establishment with exaggerated casualness that fooled absolutely nobody. Oh good, Jade muttered. An audience. The trio approached our table with varying degrees of confidence. Grix was trying to look intimidating, which was difficult when your biology resembles a pot-right walking crab. Tala was coiled in what I recognized as a defensive posture. Vesh just looked excited, which was somehow more worrying than aggression. So it is true, Grix announced loudly, his mandibles clicking. A human, here, in our academy. Guilty as charged, Jade said, not looking up from her meal. Did you want an autograph or are you here to make a dramatic statement about your feelings? Grix's carapace flushed a deeper shade of blue which indicated either anger or embarrassment. Possibly both. You do not belong here. Your species is dangerous. Violent. You nearly destroyed your own world. We did. Jade agreed calmly. And then we stopped. Pulled back. Chose a different path. That is called learning from mistakes. You should try it sometime. How do we know you will not attack us? Tully hissed, her scales rippling with agitation. How do we know this is not some kind of infiltration? A prelude to invasion? Jade set down her fork and looked directly at Tula, and I saw the predator behind those eyes. Just for a moment, if humanity wanted to invade the galactic community, we would not send one unarmed student to an academic institution. We would send a fleet. We would send soldiers. We would send weapons that would make your worst nightmares look like pleasant daydreams. But we did not do that. We sent diplomats. We sent scientists. We sent people who want to build bridges, not burn them. She picked up her fork again, and the dangerous moment passed. Besides, why would we invade? You have resources we can trade for, technology we can learn, cultures we can study, knowledge we can share. War is expensive, cooperation is profitable. We learned that lesson the hard way. Vesh, who had been silent until now, suddenly leaned forward with disturbing eagerness. Is it true that humans can survive in environments that would kill most species? That you can adapt to almost any habitat? Within reason, Jade said, we are from a high-gravity, high-oxygen world with extreme temperature variations. So yeah, we can handle environments that other species find uncomfortable, but we are not invincible. Drop me on a methane world, and I will die just as fast as anyone else. Probably faster, since I would not have an environmental suit designed for my biology. What about the adrenal response Professor Kellis mentioned? Was pressed. The chemical enhancement during stress, it is real, Jade confirmed. Fight or flight response. Our bodies dump adrenaline, cortisol, and a bunch of other compounds into our bloodstream when we perceive a threat. Makes us stronger, faster, more alert. It is a survival mechanism, useful in emergencies, terrible for long-term health if it happens too often. So you could kill us, Greek stated flatly, if you wanted to. The entire establishment went quiet. Everyone was listening now, pretending to focus on their meals while their sensory organs were all pointed in our direction. Jade was silent for a long moment, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. Yes, she said finally, I probably could. I am stronger than most species here due to my home gravity. I am faster due to my muscle structure. I have endurance that would outlast almost anyone in this room. And I have training, combat training. Every human in the diplomatic delegation has it. It is mandatory for anyone leaving Earth. But, she paused, making sure everyone was paying attention. The ability to do harm is not the same as the intention to do harm. I could also perform emergency surgery on most of you if needed. I could repair your communication devices. I could cook you a meal. I could teach you games from my culture. I could compose music. I could solve mathematical equations. I could write poetry. Humans are not defined by our capacity for violence. We are defined by what we choose to do with all our capacities. It was a good speech, measured, diplomatic, exactly the kind of thing a carefully trained representative would say, and I believed approximately 60% of it, which was probably the best ratio anyone could hope for when dealing with a species that had weaponized orbital mechanics. Pretty words, Greek sneered. But words are cheap. They are, Jade agreed, which is why I am here for a full academic cycle. Plenty of time to prove my words with actions. Plenty of time for all of you to judge for yourselves whether Herdens deserve a place in the galactic community, and plenty of time for me to fail spectacularly if I am not genuine. So how about we all agree to wait and see before jumping to conclusions? Before anyone could respond, an alarm began blaring through the establishment. Not the gentle chime of a schedule reminder, but the harsh, urgent wail of an actual emergency. The lighting shifted to red, and a synthesized voice boomed through the communication system. Alert! Hull breach detected in Sector 7. Atmospheric decompression in progress. All personnel evacuate to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. The floating gastropod erupted into chaos. Species of every configuration scrambled toward the exits, pushing and shoving in a panic that would have been comical if it was not potentially fatal. The server from earlier abandoned its post and slithered toward the emergency shelter marked by glowing signs. I felt my internal organs clench with fear. Hull breaches were rare but catastrophic. Sector 7 was 3 levels below us, but depending on the size of the breach, the entire section could decompress within minutes. Jade was already on her feet, her meal forgotten. Her entire demeanor had changed. The friendly student was gone, replaced by something focused and dangerous and completely in control. Lip. How many people live in Sector 7? I do not know, I stammered. Maybe 500. 1,000? It is mostly residential units and research labs. Evacuation time? 10 minutes. Maybe 12 if everyone moves quickly. But there are always people who do not make it. Elderly, injured, those with mobility issues. Jade's jaw clenched. I could see her mind working, calculating variables at a speed that made my eye stalks hurt. Where is the nearest emergency response station? 3 corridors north, but only trained personnel are allowed to use that equipment. I am trained personnel, Jade said. On Earth, every human over the age of 15 has emergency response training. It is mandatory. Where is the breach? How should I know? I squeaked. Jade pulled out her datapad and her fingers moved across it with frightening speed. Hacking into the station's emergency network. Should not be doing this. Definitely against protocol. But desperate times, etc., etc. The datapad chimed, and a schematic of the station appeared on screen. A red marker pulsed in Sector 7, Level 3. There. Looks like a micrometeorite strike. Small hole, but it is expanding. The hull plating around it is compromised. If it spreads to the main support beam, the entire section could detach. We need to leave, Grix said, his voice tight with fear. Now, before the pressure doors seal. You leave, Jade said, not looking up from her pad. I am going to Sector 7. That is insane, Tula hissed. You will die. Maybe, Jade admitted, but there are people down there who will definitely die if nobody helps them. And I did not come all this way to watch innocent people suffocate because of a random rock. She looked at me. and I saw something in her eyes that I had not seen before, a kind of fierce determination that went beyond logic or self-preservation. Blip. I need you to guide me to Sector 7. You know this station better than I do. But no. That is suicide. The pressure doors are already closing. We will be trapped. Probably, Jade agreed. But you have those 7,000 questions, right? Want to know what humans are really like? Want to see what we do when faced with impossible odds? Here is your chance. Or you can evacuate with everyone else. No judgment either way. This is my choice, not yours. Every rational thought in my biology was screaming at me to flee, to get to safety, to let the emergency teams handle it. But I looked at this human, this Jade Corin, who had walked into our lecture hall and casually upended 2,000 years of assumptions, and I realized something. She was going to Sector 7 whether I helped her or not. And she was probably going to die trying to save people she had never met from a species that feared her. That was either the bravest thing I had ever witnessed or the stupidest. Possibly both. And I heard myself say, I will guide you, but if we die I am haunting you in the afterlife. Fair enough, Jade said with a grim smile. She turned to the others. You three, get to safety. Alert the emergency teams that someone is heading to Sector 7. Tell them to be ready with medical support. You are insane, Grick said, but there was something in his voice that might have been respect. So I have been told, Jade replied. Now move. We ran. Well, Jade ran. I floated at maximum velocity, my propulsion membranes working overtime. The corridors were still crowded with evacuating personnel, but they parted when they saw us moving against the flow. A human running toward danger instead of away from it was apparently notable enough to warrant giving way. The pressure doors were closing, massive slabs of reinforced metal sliding into place to seal off compromised sections. We had maybe 60 seconds before Sector 7 was completely isolated. We are not going to make it, I gasped, my membrane muscles burning with exertion. Yes, we are, Jade said, and she accelerated. I did not know humans could move that fast. She was not sprinting, she was flying. Her legs pumped like pistons, her arms swung with mechanical precision, and her breathing was deep and controlled despite the exertion. This was what Professor Kellis had meant about endurance predators. This was what it looked like when a human decided that physics was more of a suggestion than a rule. We reached the pressure door with maybe 5 seconds to spare. Jade did not slow down. She dove through the gap in a move that would have been suicidal for any species with a rigid skeletal structure. She hit the ground on the other side, rolled, and came up running. I squeezed through behind her just as the doors slammed shut with a finality that made my organs vibrate. We were trapped in Sector 7 with a hull breach, escaping atmosphere, and approximately 500 terrified people who had no idea that help had just arrived in the form of a single human and her incredibly stupid Quilarian guide. Okay, Jade said, her voice steady despite the alarm klaxons and the ominous hissing sound of air escaping into space. Emergency response station should be 50 meters ahead. We get the repair equipment, patch the breach, stabilize the pressure, and then help with evacuation. Simple. Nothing about this is simple, I wheezed. True, Jade admitted. But humans have a saying, when you are going through hell, keep going. Stopping is not an option. We found the emergency response station, a reinforced locker containing repair foam, pressure patches, portable oxygen generators, and various tools I did not have names for. Jade grabbed everything she could carry, loaded it into an emergency harness, and checked the atmospheric readings on her pad. Pressure down to 70% and dropping. We have maybe 8 minutes before it hits critical levels. People with respiratory issues will start having problems in about 4. Where is the breach? I accessed the station's schematic through the emergency terminal. Residential corridor, Section C. 300 meters that way. Then let us move. We encountered our first casualty 20 meters in. An elderly Clixian had collapsed against the corridor wall, his breathing apparatus malfunctioning. His skin was already turning the sickly gray color that indicated oxygen deprivation. Jade did not hesitate. She dropped her equipment, pulled out a portable oxygen generator from her harness, and placed the mask over the Clixian's respiratory valves. Breathe, she ordered. Slow and steady. You are going to be fine. The Clixian's eyes focused on her, and I saw recognition and fear flash across his features. Human, he gasped. Yeah, Jade said. Lucky for you, Humans are really good at emergency response. Stay here. Someone will come for you once we stabilize the section. She checked his vital signs with a scanner, nodded in satisfaction, and stood up. He will live. Let us go. We found 6 more people in similar situations as we moved toward the breach. Jade stopped for each one, provided oxygen, checked vitals, offered reassurance, and kept moving. I noticed she was not moving as fast now. The weight of the equipment, the thin atmosphere, the stress. It was taking a toll, but she did not slow down, did not stop, just kept going with that terrifying human persistence that made predators out of primates. The breach was worse than the schematic had suggested. What had started as a small hole had expanded into a jagged tear in the hull plating approximately 2 meters across. Atmosphere was screaming out into the void with a sound like a dying animal. The surrounding corridors were already down to 50% pressure. "Okay," Jade said, and I could hear the strain in her voice now. "This is going to be tricky. I need to get close enough to apply the repair foam, but the suction is going to try to pull me out. Blip. I need you to anchor me. Can you do that?" "How?" I asked, my voice higher than I would have liked. "Your biology. You are less dense than most species. The suction will not affect you as much. Get behind me. Wrap yourself around something structural. Hold on to my harness. If I start getting pulled toward the breach, you pull me back." It was a terrible plan. It violated every safety protocol I had ever learned. If the breach expanded, we would both die. If the structural supports failed, we would both die. If Jade miscalculated her approach, we would both die. But 8 minutes had become 5. And there were people who needed this breach sealed. "Fine," I said, "but you owe me so many nutrient solutions after this." "Deal," Jade said with a strained smile. I positioned myself behind a support beam and extended my membrane around Jade's emergency harness. She took a deep breath, adjusted her grip on the repair foam canister, and began moving toward the breach. The suction was immediate and vicious. I felt Jade's entire body weight pulling against me as the escaping atmosphere tried to claim her, but she did not stop. She activated the repair foam, and it expanded rapidly, hopping into the breach like some kind of living thing. The foam hardened on contact with vacuum, creating a temporary seal that slowed the atmospheric loss. "Phase 1 complete," Jade grunted. "Now the pressure patch." She pulled out a large, flexible sheet designed to bond with hull material under extreme conditions. Getting it positioned over the foam-filled breach, while fighting the suction, was like trying to fold a sheet in a hurricane. But Jade did it. She slapped the patch over the breach, activated the bonding agent, and the atmospheric loss went from a scream to a whisper. The pressure stabilized. The alarms did not stop, but they changed tone, indicating a contained situation rather than an ongoing catastrophe. Jade collapsed against the corridor wall, breathing hard. Phase 2 complete. Now we just have to wait for the emergency teams to arrive and handle the evacuation. "You saved them," I said, still wrapped around the support beam because I did not trust my membrane muscles to hold me in place otherwise. "You actually saved them." "We saved them," Jade corrected. "Could not have done it without your help, Blip." Before I could respond, the pressure door at the far end of the corridor began to open. Emergency response teams flooded in, along with security personnel, medical units, and about a dozen different officials who looked like they were having the worst day of their administrative lives. The team leader, a Morgathian in full emergency gear, stopped dead when he saw Jade. "You," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been respect. "You are the human." "Guilty," Jade said tiredly. "The breach is temporarily sealed, but you will need to do a full structural repair." I applied standard emergency protocols. "There are injured people in the surrounding corridors who need medical attention, and please tell me you brought water because I am extremely dehydrated right now." The team leader made a gesture that translated roughly as acknowledgement and respect. "Your actions today will be noted in the official report. You may have saved hundreds of lives." "Just doing what needed to be done," Jade said, accepting a water container from one of the medical units. She drank deeply, and I noticed her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Any human would have done the same. "Somehow," the team leader said quietly, "I believe you." The next several hours were a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and official statements. Jade and I were shuttled from one office to another, answering the same questions repeatedly while bureaucrats tried to figure out how to classify what had happened. Finally, we were released. We emerged from the administration building to find a crowd waiting outside. Students, faculty, station personnel. They had heard what happened. Word had spread through the station network faster than a hull breach. And they were not shouting threats or accusations. They were silent, watching, evaluating. Professor Kellis was there, standing at the front of the crowd. He approached Jade slowly, his mercury skin reflecting the station lighting in shifting patterns. "I owe you an apology, Miss Corrin," he said formally. "My lecture this morning was based on incomplete data. I painted your species as extinct monsters, but you have shown us something different today. You showed us what humans can be when given the choice." Jade smiled tiredly. "Professor, you were not entirely wrong. We are dangerous. We are capable of terrible violence. We nearly destroyed ourselves. Those parts of your lecture were accurate, but we are also capable of incredible compassion, stubborn loyalty, irrational bravery. We are complicated, just like every other sentient species in the galaxy. The only difference is we spent 2,000 years in isolation, thinking really hard about which parts of our nature we wanted to emphasize moving forward." She looked at the crowd, at all the different species watching her with varying expressions of curiosity, fear, respect, and hope. Earth wants to join the galactic community, not as conquerors, not as warriors, not as the scary monsters from your history books, but as partners, as allies, as friends, and yes, if you ever face a threat that requires our particular skill set, as protectors, because that is what humans do. We protect our own, and if you accept us, you become our own. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began a slow clapping sound. I recognized it as a Hectarian gesture of approval. Others joined in, each species adding their own version of applause. The sound built and echoed through the station corridors until it was almost deafening. Grix pushed his way through the crowd, his carapace still slightly blue with embarrassment. "I was wrong about you," he said bluntly. "You are terrifying, but maybe that is not a bad thing." "High praise from a Hectarian," Jade said with a grin. "Do not let it go to your head," Grix muttered. Tilla slithered forward next. "You could have died in there. Why risk it?" "Because that is what you do for your community," Jade said simply. "You protect it, you serve it, you sacrifice for it. Earth learned that lesson the hard way. We nearly lost everything because we forgot that basic truth. We will not make that mistake again." I floated closer to Jade, exhausted but also strangely exhilarated. "So what now?" I asked. "You have proven your point. Shown everyone that humans are not the monsters from Professor Kellis's lecture. Mission accomplished." Jade shook her head. "Mission barely started. Today was one crisis, one moment. I still have an entire academic cycle ahead of me. Plenty of opportunities to mess up, plenty of chances to prove everyone's worst fears correct." She looked at me, and her expression was serious. "But I will tell you what I told the Council before I left Earth. Humanity has spent 2,000 years preparing for this moment. We have studied, we have trained, we have changed. We are ready. The question is not whether we deserve a place among the stars. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us." "That is extremely arrogant," I pointed out. "Probably," Jade agreed cheerfully. "But like I said, humans are terrible at humility. We prefer confidence with occasional moments of paralyzing self-doubt. It is one of our many charming quirks." She looked up at the artificial sky of the station's central dome, where stars shone through the transparent plating. 2,000 years we have been trapped in our solar system. 2,000 years of wondering what was out here, what we were missing, who we might meet, and now we finally get our chance. Whatever happens next, it is going to be interesting. "Interesting is one word for it," I muttered. "Terrifying is another." "Those are not mutually exclusive," Jade pointed out. She was right, of course. Humans were terrifying, dangerous, unpredictable. Everything Professor Kellis had said about them was true, but they were also brave, loyal, stubborn enough to run toward danger when everyone else ran away, creative enough to find solutions where others saw only problems, and just possibly, exactly what the galaxy needed. "So," Jade said, slinging her bag over her shoulder and starting to walk toward the residential districts, You still want to be acquaintances with potential for upgrade, because fair warning, my species is going to make your life very complicated for the foreseeable future. I floated alongside her, my membrane muscles still aching from the ordeal in Sector 7. I think we upgraded to friends somewhere around the time I became your anchor point during a hull breach repair. Friends, it is, Jade said, extending her hand in that human gesture of greeting. Welcome to the most interesting period of galactic history, Bliptarans. Population everyone. Status, it is complicated. I extended a membrane to touch her hand, sealing the agreement. And as we walked through the station corridors with other students giving us a respectful distance, I realized something. Professor Kellis had been right. The deadliest species in galactic history was not gone. They had simply been waiting, learning, preparing. And now they were here. And somehow, against all logic and survival instincts, I was glad. Because if the galaxy was going to face whatever challenges came next, having humans on our side was probably not the worst idea. Terrifying. Yes. Chaotic. Absolutely. Prone to making impossible situations even more complicated, definitely. But boring? Never. And in a galaxy full of infinite possibilities, maybe that was exactly what we needed.